In New York City, Evie is a struggling ceramic artist who makes a living working freelance in a catering business. She gets a goodie bag from her friend Grace, which contains a DNA test, and little does Evie know, this little test will change her life forever. After Evie's mother passed away, Evie often struggles to keep up her spirits. Evie takes the DNA test and soon gets the results. Apparently, she has a distant cousin from England named Oliver Alexander, who offers to meet her on his trip to New York City. Evie goes to meet an overzealous Oliver, and while talking, Oliver tells Evie she's a part of the family scandal that took place in 1925. Evie's great-grandmother, Emmeline, had an affair with a footman and had given birth to their love child just before her nuptials. She kept it a secret from everyone and had the footman take their son to his village where he raised the baby. Oliver invites Evie to another cousin's wedding in England. Initially reluctant, Evie hops on the plane after Oliver promises it's an all-expense-paid trip. Evie soon reaches New Carfax Abbey and is awestruck by the manor. While waiting for Oliver, Evie has a run-in with the head butler, Mr. Field, and does not shy away from telling him how she feels about his rudeness to the female waitstaff. Walter DeVille, the lord of the manor, steps in to smooth the situation over. Once Evie becomes aware of who Walter is, his charm makes her forget her words. Mr. Field then escorts Evie inside into her room and asks her to stay away from the library due to renovations. That night, Walter, ever so courteous, visits Evie's room to apologize for her and Mr. Field's shaky start, and his attempt to set things right makes Evie like him even more. Later that night, a maid goes in the library and finds the lights have gone out. Nevertheless, she lights up the candles and proceeds to clean while enjoying peppy music on her earphones. But there's somebody else in there with her, who probably doesn't like the music she's listening to. It makes its presence known before putting on a classic song on the gramophone. The maid looks horrified as she senses its presence and is soon attacked and taken away. The next morning, Evie's woken up by Mrs. Swift, the maid assigned to Evie, to get ready for the reunion party. At the party, Evie wears a beautiful gold dress, a gift from Walter, and is introduced to the maids of honor, Victoria and Lucy. Lucy seems friendly and talks gleefully with Evie, while Victoria is contemptuous. Walter arrives soon after and he directly approaches Evie to invite her for the first dance. After sweeping her off her feet, Walter takes Evie to his abundant man cave that has everything needed for a pottery class. Evie is fascinated and tells Walter her mother is the reason she loves pottery. They flirt a little before they finally give in to their desires and kiss each other. By the time the guests leave, Evie's already in bed but is soon woken up by someone whispering her name. She sees a shadow and someone crawling over the canopy to her bed. Spooked, she jumps out of bed, crawling underneath it for refuge. Suddenly, she's pulled out by Walter. Evie, almost in tears, tells Walter there was someone in her room, but he assures her there's nothing and hugs her, bringing her some comfort. Walter offers to stay till Evie falls asleep. The following day, Evie is woken by Lucy and Victoria, who hand her a silk gown to get ready for a spa day. While Lucy and Evie get a manicure, Victoria takes a swim and at the same time takes a jab at Evie for getting close to Walter without first getting to know him. Evie becomes irritated, but before their squabble can escalate, Evie gets nicked by scissors, and she starts bleeding from her finger. Victoria walks over feigning concern and takes Evie's finger and sucks the blood off, but Evie immediately pulls her hand back and walks away, while Victoria laughs and chides that Evie will get used to her. Evie's walking back to her room when she crosses the library and gets curious. She finds the key to the locked door and goes inside to see what the family is hiding. She finds a file with her name, pictures of her, and printouts detailing her history. Enraged, she starts packing her belongings when Walter arrives, and she confronts Walter for stalking her. But Walter handles it pretty well and explains that he wanted to ensure Evie is genuine and not an opportunist, as people usually are when dealing with filthy rich people. Walter profusely apologizes and they kiss, which quickly turns hot and heavy in the sheets. It's the masquerade rehearsal dinner and Walter welcomes the three great families, the Billingtons of Whitby, Klopstocks of Budapest, and Alexanders of London. Evie's finally excited to meet the bride and the groom, but she's in for a surprise when Walter announces Evie and he are to be wed. As she tries to stop Walter, a maid brings out a glass bowl, and Mr. Field slits her throat, filling up the bowl with her blood. Evie is horrified at the sudden sight of all the blood and the people happily waiting to be served a glass of it. It's revealed they're all vampires, and the Alexanders have been providing women of their families as wives to the DeVille family for generations in return for safety and wealth, until Emmeline, who was supposed to be Walter's third wife, chose to end her life because she didn't want to marry a monster. Evie gets up and starts walking in a daze but is stopped by the guards. She pleads with them to let her go and becomes enraged when no one moves. She tries to escape by banging on the door, but Walter becomes annoyed by her reluctance and orders Lucy and Victoria to get her ready for tomorrow, the ceremony. She's tied to a chair and carried to the basement where Victoria and Lucy arrive to prepare Evie for the big ceremony. They explain that Evie's blood, once combined with their blood, will make them immune to time, the strongest they've been in years, and once Evie drinks Walter's blood, she'll gain all his strength. Suddenly, one of the maids named Dia appears in chains and Victoria orders the workers to prepare Dia for the sacrifice. They proceed to lock Evie in a coffin till the next morning, when Mrs. Swift arrives and frees Evie from the coffin. She tries to help her escape and on their way tells her fire or beheading is the only way to eliminate the vampires. Unfortunately, Mrs. Swift has to pay with her life for letting Evie escape. While Mr. Field is hot on her pursuit, Evie manages to escape and reaches the town at night, where she asks one of the residents for help. The elderly couple turns out to be Jonathan and Mina Harker, who work for Walter. Evie senses something's wrong, and as she tries to escape, she's knocked unconscious by Mina. Evie wakes up to find herself back in the manor, lying beside another maid named Imogen. Walter is happy to see her back, and when she asks who he is, Walter reveals he's the Dracula, or the son of the dragon. He reminds Evie that she'll be blessed with power, wealth, eternal youth, and much more if she willingly agrees to their union. He then proceeds to drink Imogen's blood by biting into her leg. It's all too much for Evie to deal with, and she soon passes out. This time, upon waking, Evie finds herself dressed as a bride, being escorted down the aisle. Walter tells her he's happy she changed her mind. Evie remembers what her mother always told her. When things are hard, you're stronger than you think. Evie looks to the lit candles and knows what she must do. She says yes to her vows, bites Walter's wrist and drinks his blood, making him weak. She absorbs his power and turns into a vampire. Evie walks to Dia in the guise of wanting to drink her blood, but instead knocks over all the candles on the altar, catching the room on fire. A weak Walter tries to stop her, but Evie stabs him in the chest, which rapidly ages him. Evie frees Dia of her restraints and together they flee, but an enraged Victoria follows them and attacks Evie. She pierces Evie's chest with her nails, but Dia attacks Victoria, which makes her let go of Evie. Victoria attacks Dia, sending her flying, but Dia survives and flees. Victoria shifts her attention back to Evie and is ready to eliminate her, but is stopped by Lucy. This enrages Victoria even more and she starts attacking Lucy, who fights back. Lucy pushes Victoria and the two end up getting impaled by a spear that turns them both into ashes. Evie turns to leave, but Mr. Field attacks her with a spear. Evie fights back and, disgusted by her mere presence, Mr. Field admits he never saw her worthy of Walter, and he wished he had eliminated her grandfather when he had the chance. Evie has had enough, so she breaks off the spear and using the metal she stabs Mr. Field in his heart. She grabs a metal wire before walking out of the now burning manor, but Walter, who's still alive, catches hold of her. She uses the wire to sever Walter's wrist and kicks him into the fire. As he burns, Evie reverts back to a human and loses her vampire powers after Walter dies. She walks out of the manor triumphant and doesn't bother to look back as it's engulfed in flames. 2 weeks later, Evie and Grace are in London after they've tracked down Oliver, who prepares to flee after paying the police off and destroying the evidence of his trickery. He thinks he's gotten away scotch-free, but he's messed with the wrong girl. Evie aims to make him pay for luring her into a monstrous trap and aiding the vampires. The tables have turned, and Evie and Grace are about to put Oliver's head on a platter. After all, revenge is a dish best served cold. That's a recap for the movie The Invitation. Hit subscribe on Recaps of Fear for tips on how to avoid being taken by Dracula, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on the best horror movie recaps. Stay tuned, stay spooked, and remember, forewarned is forearmed in the horror arena.